Morning, good morning. Welcome to another episode of Spill the Tea. Today we have with us Dr. Keats Snideman, and he is a physical therapist, a strength and conditioning coach, and a sports massage therapist. I have to disclose that Dr. Keats was my coach back in the early 2000s. He's the one who taught me about functional fitness. And I want the viewers to also understand that Dr. Pete and T run Ketonic Revolution, and we're a company where we're trying to reach out and help people get better health, better metabolic health through reversing diabetes, obesity, and cardiovascular disease. But in that process, we understand that besides diet, that the other components, sleep, stress reduction, and then finally the issue that we're going to talk about today is movement, and that those things are also super important to those of us like me who's in my early 60s, and I don't want to end up inactive and stuck on the sofa. All right, so and I should also mention before I hand this over to Dr. Keats that that I also study movement in older people, in predominantly myself. I have a movement program that I use. And one of the main reasons I was so excited today to have Keats with us is because my system's not working clearly because I keep getting hurt. So I'm hoping that we can learn and we can get some information, maybe a different way of doing this that's going to work better, so I actually can help the people that I'm reaching out to. So without further ado, I want to hand this over to Keats with the question, what kind of programming do you think somebody my age, the people that are plus 50, plus 60, what is it we should be focused on so that we can not only stay healthy, but maybe, you know, reach for a higher plateau and do this without getting hurt?
That's a fantastic question. And well, first of all, thanks for having me, and anybody who's watching and anybody who will be watching this on the repeat. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to Pete and myself talk about this very important topic, because we have so many people that are over 50, over 60 in this country, as evident with the current pandemic, and obviously the health risks that it has sort of imposed upon sort of our aging population. I think fitness has been brought even more into the forefront, and the importance of not being sedentary and not being obese and not smoking and all these things. So I think health, this discussion we're having right now, kind of under what we've sort of witnessed in the last year, is pretty important. So in terms of programming, I mean, kind of like you said, the most important thing is to be aware of like your injuries. It's a lot easier as we get older, unfortunately, to sort of obtain these niggles, you know, these aches and pains, these prior injuries that sort of come back and haunt us. And so we have to be very mindful that while we need to challenge ourselves, even as we get older, you know, 60s, 70s, 80s, we need to realize we're not 20 and we're not 30. And the programming that that a coach would use or someone would use for themselves, even in their 40s or 30s, is going to be different in your 50s and 60s and beyond. And so the number one thing really needs to be health, and it really needs to be progress, and it needs to be realistic rather than sort of dogmatic, like, oh, this is the program I used 20 years ago, it worked great then, but now I'm getting hurt, or now my shoulders are getting injured. Yeah, and so, and that's, I mean, that's predominantly the population I work with is 50 plus, you know, sort of 50 to 80. Obviously, I have younger, I've worked with athletes, I still work with some younger athletes, but my bread and butter is really sort of the 50 to 80 plus range, and mostly 50 to 75, let's say. And everybody in that age group has had some kind of past injury or surgery or some sort of a health condition that is a concern to how you program your fitness and your movement. And so I think the important thing is really to ensure that the training is sustainable. So I'm very principle based, much like yourself. So the first principle is obviously you have to enjoy it. You have to like it, right? If you don't
Yeah.
enjoy running and your partner or spouse or friend wants to run marathons, and it's probably not going to, it's probably not going to be something that's going to work for you long term, right?
Right.
And conversely, if somebody, your partner or a workout buddy, or somebody really likes CrossFit or like weightlifting, which obviously is something you and I are fond of, but you don't enjoy it at all. Not that you shouldn't do it, but we have to find a way to get you to do versions of it that are going to work for you, that are going to keep you being able to train with minimal risk. I think it's really important to say at the outset, like there's no such thing as like injury prevention. Like there's absolutely no way to get around some risk if you get off the couch and decide to go do something. But we have to outweigh sort of the positives and the negatives. What are the risks of staying sedentary? What are the risks of
Right.
keeping a standard American diet versus the small risk that you may get some little tweaks and aches and pains as you start training and moving more? So it just needs to be managed,
So one of the
rather than saying, go ahead.
One of the conflicts that you see not only all over the internet, but every single time and perhaps this is more recent for me because I have been over the last few years, undergoing a lot of training to get caught up in a lot of these areas, training that you probably had a while ago. But I'm guessing that you can probably relate to this. One of the discussions that always happens if you're sitting in a CrossFit certification course, or if it's one of Mark Ripeto's long weekends or whatever, is the argument between what is health and what is fitness.
Right.
So before I get to, you said some other things too, I want to come back and focus on, because I'm really interested to hear your opinions in these two areas. But how do you define health?
Well, I kind of like the sort of the definition that health is more than just the absence of like disease, right? Like in this country, due to modern technology, and medications and surgeries and heart surgeries and whatnot, we have increased people's lifespans, right? People are living longer, but have we also increased their health span, right? Which is the period
they're defining
of
health
time
as being not in the hospital.
Yeah, and that's not enough. Like health, I mean, you could talk about physical health, which is like the health of your organs, like, the health of your eyes, the health of your brain, your cardiovascular health, like what is your blood work? What are your numbers, cholesterol and blood, what's your blood pressure? Like there's some certain metrics that are pretty important for all of us. But what is your, your emotional health? What is your, sort of your, like, are your basic needs being met? So like sort of these, like the Maslow's like sort of essential needs, like do you have, security, food, shelter, like assuming all those things are met. And obviously right now under this pandemic, there's a lot of struggling people that have lost their work, they're on unemployment, whatever. Like some of their basic needs aren't being met. So their fitness routine is probably the last thing of their concern, right? Like if you don't have the basic needs, some of your health is not there. But assuming someone has those basic needs met, it would just encompass all those things I just discussed. And then obviously someone's emotional health. If your mental health is not good, if someone has severe depression or, extreme anxiety, that has to be addressed, I think as part of an overall comprehensive health package before someone could probably really be serious and strict with their fitness and their exercise. It's like we have to have those kind of minimum things.
Yeah.
And I think mental health has also taken a big sort of a big stage in the last year with all this, quarantine and people social isolation, and it's been challenging for, for a lot of people. So I think that needs to be included in on the mental health. But, one of the benefits of exercise, obviously, is that it can improve your stress levels, and it can improve your mood. And if someone is battling depression, that certainly needs to be addressed with, from the appropriate professionals. But like for me personally, I can't speak for you, but I would assume, because you've been active your whole life, like exercise is a form of, it's a drug. It's a good drug if you do it right, and it really gives you a lot of mental health benefits. Obviously, improving those other health metrics that we were just talking about, all the numbers. But then I would also throw in there like orthopedic health and like movement health. Like you may have good cholesterol and numbers, and you can kind of walk around the block a couple times. But if you can't do anything kind of moderately vigorous, or you can't get your arms overhead, or, you can't squat even well on and off a toilet, and you have to use your arms, your orthopedic health is probably, or your musculoskeletal health is probably a little bit poor.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think that you keep bringing up the lipid numbers, so I want to point out that those also are influenced by exercise. So
Of course.
if you're the standard American who's eating, badly and not taking care of themselves, mentally, and they are, so they're not managing their diet, and they're also not managing their activity level. One thing that I've noticed, because I am right now, and I'm not advocating this to the people that I work with necessarily. Tanner will point out to me quite often that I'm operating in the extreme. But if I'm going to be the top priority as a health coach, then I want to know these markers. So the latest thing that I've moved into is trying to understand sleep better. So I picked up the Aura Ring, and it's, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it along with the Whoop, they have clinical grade data that comes out of that. So I'm looking at what happens to my sleep patterns when I say have 2 beers with dinner, or in terms of exercise, because I noticed that yesterday I went out and I did. It's one of the women CrossFits. It's like 5 push-ups, 5 pull-ups, 5 air squats, and then
is it Cindy?
is that the one? It's supposed to be done as a sprint, but what I did was I went outside and said, all right, I'm going to do 100 total reps. So 20 sets of that. But instead of doing it like a sprint, the way the CrossFit does it, I said, I'm just going to go along and I'm going to do 100 of each of these elements, but I'm going to take my time doing it. And I noticed that my sleep last night, I noticed that my deep sleep was fraction of the total was like 20 minutes. It was pretty remarkable, because the one thing that I'm starting to see a trend with, and I want to get back to Keats here, is that if I go out and I go balls to the wall on a CrossFit workout, my sleep that night is usually not that good.
Right.
And I'm trying to rectify that, because, here's what I've been taught, and I want to get some feedback from you, Keats, on this, is that in the course of a week, you should be moving every day. You know what I mean? And that can be whatever it is. For me, it's like we live in a nice neighborhood and we have a 2-mile loop. So I'll go and I'll walk the 2 miles as a rule. You're supposed to have high intensity training 2 to 3 days a week, right? This is what I've been taught. And technically I use Tabatas for that because I like them. You have music and if you're clever, the timing's done for you and you just go and stop, right? And then you're supposed to be lifting heavy at least 2 days a week. And so that's more or less what I've been doing. But like I said, I've gotten hurt. You just worked on my shoulder, which is getting better, by the way, but I've really backed off. Like yesterday, I just said, instead of going out and just throwing myself at the wall, right? I probably was out there, I don't know, 40 or 50 minutes or something to do that. But in any case, let me shut up and go back to you about this. I mean, so what are you looking at then when you want, how should someone my age look at this? When we hear, we have all this information coming in about,
Right.
okay, these three things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that's, that's not too far off from what I do with my, my, my GRE athletes, my athletes of aging. First of all, I think people who are aging are the ultimate athletes. So when people tell me, oh, well, I'm not an athlete, I'm just a 75-year-old, I'll say, you're the ultimate athlete, right? Aging is the ultimate extreme sport any of us will ever do. Just fact.
Yeah.
It is brutal. And it is so challenging, like, to age. Obviously, some people have different genetics and age better than others, and life throws at you all these different stressors, and our genetics can go in one way or another way. We call that epigenetics, right? But like, everybody, I think, knows they need to be doing this or they need to be doing that. We all hear this stuff, but how to translate that into something practical is difficult, because most of the stuff, like you mentioned, CrossFit, obviously you're probably one of the older gentlemen that was there when you started, with the CrossFit. And unless you have a coach that can scale it, it's going to scare a lot of sort of boomers away. A lot of even people over 40s, when your mobility and your things start, your connective tissue start changing, about 40s, even in your 30s, which is why it's amazing to see, like, Tom Brady's going to be doing the Super Bowl this week and he's 43. I mean, he's a pretty young guy, but he's pretty old for a football player.
Yeah.
Right. That's impressive. Drew Brees was another guy. So I'm not a huge Tom Brady fan, but I'm a fan for him just because he's older, right? Because this guy is like showing that you can keep going. But the key is that, you have to have, it has to be sustainable. So like, if you do these workouts and you end up like destroyed for a week or 2 weeks, or you can't, like, you won the workout, but you lost the war, or like, you won the battle, but you lost the war. So I always tell people, like, don't worry about, like, live to fight another day. Don't win the workout, like, win the week, win the month, win the year, win the decade. Like, there'll always be time to ramp it up. So like, one of the problems I have with CrossFit for older people is that, like, unless you really know how to scale it, which we talked about a lot over the years, like, not everybody can do like snatches or cleans and their wrists get irritated. So I think it's important to find help, or to find a coach or someone like yourself who knows how to scale it, or someone like myself. There's a lot of other coaches that I know. My twin brother in San Diego is very good at scaling this stuff. Is to be able to, it's more like, what do we get from those CrossFit exercises? Or what is it about the snatch or the thruster or the clean that's valuable? But what is it that's risky and can hurt you? So how do we modify that? Right? For me, like, I'll do a lot of like kettlebell work, right? Where it's a lot easier to catch on your wrist. You don't have to end up in this position. You end up here, right? So the wrists don't take a beating. It's a lot easier to get one arm overhead than like two arms, right? Or like with the swing like this, well, why can't we just do a snatch or just do a swing to here? So I think the important thing is don't get married, especially as we get older. I'm not saying married to another individual. Don't marry an exercise, or don't marry an implement. Marry the training effect. Like, what is it that we're trying to get out of those exercises, and how do we modify it so that we can get those metabolic changes, those increase in our mitochondria, better bone density, better balance, right? Better explosion, power, force development. The thing we lose most as we age is actually power and speed. Well, a lot of those CrossFit exercises are great because they involve speed and power, but they're over a range of motion that a lot of people, it's like writing a check you can't cash. So if you're constantly getting beat up from your workout, it's like bouncing your orthopedic checkbook. You're overdrawing your bank account. And if you just keep doing it over and over again, that's kind of dumb. Like, it's like, no, how do I modify this? So that's why I don't have a lot of people back squat or do cleans. I mean, I'm certified as an Olympic weightlifting coach, but even with some of my younger athletes, their wrists are hurting them. So I'm doing more kettlebells or dumbbells, or I'm looking for elements of those lifts that are valuable but I don't get married to it, if that makes any sense. You have to be willing to pivot and be like, well, this isn't working for my body. So how do I pivot and keep the training process going so that you don't have to take these big layoffs? The goal is to keep training, right? So you accumulate all those positive benefits, but minimize those negative drawbacks like wrists, shoulders, lower back. If someone can't pick a bar up from the floor safely, you know, like a deadlift or a clean, well, you raise the ground, you put some plates under, or, you know, do it from a rack, or like, there's always a way to modify it so you meet yourself where you're at right at this moment, instead of saying, no, the program says this, so I have to do this. The program is only like, it's like a recipe, but if you don't have all the ingredients, like, it's not going to work out well. So you have to modify the recipe, right? Make
Yeah, I
sense?
really like this philosophy because, you know, I've been challenged when I did my certification training with CrossFit again this fall. I had to coach and then demonstrate, you know, the snatch and the I think the snatch and the clean, you know, and I've gotten to the point where I can do the clean, but the snatch just annihilated my shoulders, and I think that really aggravated my right shoulder in particular, and I'm still dealing with that. And the thing is that, you know, I like the programming in CrossFit from the point of view that it's functional, and how I got there was from you, because the stuff that we used to do in the gym all the time was really functional. And when I realized that I had to start doing something, that I myself had to get off the couch and stop with the silly philosophy that I could just readapt to whatever it is I was doing, whether it be climbing or cave diving in a week, right? Well, might really do that when you're 30, but not now. But that tunnel vision, the CrossFit tunnel vision, that the coaches have to be trained that way. Also, I experienced the same thing with the starting strength, Mark Ripeto's organization, that, you know, here are the 5 lifts. They have to be done. And if you're going to be a starting strength coach, then you have to coach these lifts, right? And it's like, all right, so here I am again with the presses, my overheads, which you know, going along with your advice, which I really, really like. I have moved to, when I'm doing these presses and the jerks, to do them with either a kettlebell or a dumbbell, one shoulder at a time. I don't have those restrictions, and the adaptation that I go through, whatever pain I have, you know, is muscular rather than being what I've had in this left shoulder, which is like the wrong kind of pain, you know, that lasts for a long
joint pain, like your bursas can get all swollen, and rotator cuff irritation. It's really easy in the masters lifter, to overdo those things. It doesn't take much.
Well,
I wanted to.
Yeah, go for it, T. I was hoping you jump in.
Oh, well, no, I was just going to jump in from like a younger perspective too, because I know this is like plus 60, but also from a younger individual's like standpoint, is I have a very similar body type to Dad. Thanks, Dad. Which means that my whole body like gets really, really tight and really uncomfortable. And when I do certain workouts, and to top it off, I had a snowboarding accident in college, which ended up really hurting my rotator cuff muscle, that if I end up lifting or doing something incorrectly on my right arm, then I'm out. Like, it hurts, you know, and I have to like respect that. And the one thing that, like, I love CrossFit, but the one thing that you actually mentioned at the beginning was having severe anxiety. I have severe anxiety disorder. And so the intensity level that CrossFit was taking me to the point that like I was afraid to scale my workouts because of how high intense it was, that I was kind of getting to that point that I was like, I would have really bad anxiety before I even went to CrossFit, you know, and then I'd go to CrossFit, and then it's like the whole workout I was having basically like, I have to be this good, I have to be lifting this, you know, because it's so like that, except that my body, I cannot physically withstand that type of intensity level because I do have injuries. My knees are bad from running competitively for 9 years. Like, there's a really long list of things that, you know, like even for someone who's 25, like my body still hurts. And I think it's really important for younger individuals. Like I've really started getting into yoga because I can actually stretch my body. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, and that's what I need is I need to spend 30 to 45 minutes a day making sure my body is stretched versus feeling like, okay, I'm going to go lift all this stuff. I'm going to come back. My rotator cuff's going to hurt. And then I'm going to feel like crap for the rest of the day because my body hurts. And so I also think it's important for younger individuals as well to notice that their bodies, like, you know, if you did high school sports, football, cross country, track, I mean, whatever you did that competitively, like how I was running competitively, you are bound to have, if you haven't seen it, you're probably bound to start feeling certain aspects. Like my knees, we hiked the Grand Canyon last October, 2 Octobers ago, rim to rim. And when I went on that downhill, my knees just the whole entire way, like I wanted to like rip them off. They hurt so bad. So there's just certain parts of like the high intensity stuff I enjoy, but I really like what you're saying. Like I've been doing a lot of kettlebell things. Like if I feel like doing a high intensity workout, because the reality is like it hurts my arm. If my arm, it hurts my rotator. You know, I don't want to hurt it if I'm going into like a full blown, you know, snatch. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, well you did that. Let's put more weight on. And I'm like, well, no, like it took me years to get over this and it still hurts. So I guess it's,
no, these are great points. I think that's why I'm, you know, not to toot my own horn, but I'm a pretty good coach because I was not blessed with natural mobility like you either. Like I can overload my tendons really easy. And I've had so many injuries and so many aches and pains and tendon disorders and things that I've had to learn the hard way. And so the one thing that I think that I've picked up probably in the last 10 to 15 years is like, if something's really bothering you, it's okay to like switch and do something else. But when you have a system, and God, this is sounding like it's anti-CrossFit. CrossFit has been
I'm not anti, I love CrossFit.
For the industry,
I love CrossFit.
And really good CrossFit affiliates and coaches will modify things and change things. So this is not just on CrossFit. I mean, it could be Orange Theory. It could be any of these high interval where like, here's the workout, you have to do it. And you feel, if you see other people doing it, you feel sort of ashamed or like, oh, I'm not guilty because I'm not doing what they're doing. And so you push yourself to levels, which is like writing a check you can't cash. And like, you have to push yourself. I have clients that are in their, you know, 50s all the way to in their 70s that are still making progress and can do pull-ups and chin-ups when they never used to be able to do, and they're getting stronger. And they never feel totally trashed or ever really sore. And we manage their old injuries because the process that I take with them is very fluid, and we adjust as needed. Two of my clients might actually be listening on one of these. I'm not sure if they are. If you are, Terry and Jane, hello. But they're in their 70s, and they've been working with me for quite some time, maybe close to 9 or 10 years now. But they both had some recent little irritations of a knee and a back, and we still trained. We just modified the program. We lightened it up. We changed the movement. So Olympic lifting, which is really common in CrossFit, and bench press, and those like the Mark Ripito lifts, or the ones that he promotes, which are fantastic, and I use them. They're sports in and of themselves, right? Like powerlifting is a sport, Olympic weightlifting is a sport, and there's a lot of skill and technique involved. So when you throw a couple different sports at people that you're not really even versed in just basic body movement or awareness, or like gymnastics, for example, there's a lot of cool gymnastics stuff in CrossFit. And all of a sudden you got to do like handstand push-ups. You're like, well, I haven't even done a headstand in 30 years. Like there needs to be a sequence of easing people into this stuff, right? To let the connective tissues adapt and let their ligaments, their capsules, you know, just their brain, just to figure out like, how do I stabilize in this position? And so I think it's not the exercise's fault. It's, you know, it's like, oh, I hate squats. I squatted and hurt my knee. I hate those overhead squats. Like, no, it's never the exercise. You don't blame it. It's inappropriate use of the exercise or inappropriate load, too much intensity, maybe not enough rest. Obviously with interval training, which is really popular in CrossFit and things like Orange Theory, it's very, very much about high intensity and very short rest. You get that real pukey feeling, which makes you feel like you're doing a lot. But when you're fatigued, your coordination and your motor control, which is like the medical term for coordination, it kind of goes south. And so when you got these like big loads overhead, or you're trying to do all this stuff and you're super tired, it's kind of a recipe for it putting you at an increased risk. I would never tell somebody if you're doing this, you're gonna get injured, and maybe you'll be fine. But a lot of people do get injured and they do end up kind of tweaked. And the goal is to minimize that as much as possible so that you can keep, like my clients really enjoy their training. I mean, there might be certain exercises, I don't really like that one. And if they really don't like it, we get rid of it. But if they don't like it just because it's hard, not because it's injuring them, we work on it. See if we can overcome maybe some psychological element, right?
Absolutely. Because I have fun too. I have fun with what I do. And I naturally gravitated away from, messing with the overhead squat, right? And I have worked towards the clean because I really, really like it. And it didn't technically really bother me that much once I started to get my mobility to open up.
Yeah.
But the overhead presses standing, right? The standing ones,
Mm-hmm.
and the overhead squat, I had more or less, left behind up until October when I went through that class again. And I'm still battling fixing that. So like, I'm totally into what you're saying about this. And I feel like when and if I do work with somebody in this area, that I need to be really careful about how we proceed with it. I was going to ask you another question. Are you familiar with Phil Maffetone's perspective with the 180 minus age? What that was kind of the way I did that workout yesterday. Because like in my health coach training, I was taught that methodology, right? And then I sort of forgot about it as I went into the fall, and I'm like, all right, what am I going to do about keeping up with the movement aspect of my training, And I ended up back in the CrossFit thing, and I don't know if it was convenient or not, but I forgot. Now I'm looking at these ideas again. What's your opinion about that?
Yeah, I mean, for those who don't know, I mean, you can look him up, Phil Maffetone. I think it's Maffetone. He's got some books out. I learned about him probably almost 20 years ago, and I read one of his books. I'm not sure how scientifically validated all his stuff is. He was a physician, so he does have medical training. But there does seem to be some pretty good evidence on, like, he really espouses this, like, you really need to develop your aerobic system before you really dive into high intensity training, which is like what, a lot of these things that are so popular these days talk about, these butt kicking, ass kicking workouts. And his program, which I've tried, where you're trying to keep your heart rate within like a certain, it's the 180 minus, you got that certain window to really build up that aerobic system, to build up what's called your heart rate variability, which is what, like, that little loop, we talked about heart rate variability probably even back in my gym in Tempe 10 years ago. But and so heart rate variability is like, it's the difference, like if we look at one of those, like if you did like an EKG and you've got the little thing, like it's the difference between one of the peaks of the waves to the other one.
Absolutely.
And it basically says, like, it's looking at how well your nervous system, particularly like your autonomic nervous system. So you have like your fight or flight, right? The run and, which you need when you're doing a high intensity workout. I like to sprint. So when I sprint, I have to get a little bit into my fight or flight, right? Because that would be the flight. And then you have, so that's the sympathetic. And then you have your rest and digest, or your parasympathetic. And that's like the brakes for your sympathetic nervous system. So the default for all of us, for our sympathetic nervous system is, for our nervous system is the accelerator. It's the autonomic accelerator into the fight or flight. And so that kind of aerobic training that Phil Maffetone is talking about, which aerobic athletes just do anyway, where you're really sort of in that that moderate intensity, not the high intensity, that builds up that parasympathetic nervous system, which improves your heart rate variability, which is basically, there's a big nerve coming from your brain called the vagus nerve. And that vagus nerve goes to a lot of your organs and does things. The vagus nerve is like the brakes for your heart rate and like your blood pressure. And it increases like the activity of like your digestion, slows your heart rate, lowers your blood pressure. And so I feel if someone only does high intensity exercise and they're just addicted to it, they're probably overstimulating their sympathetic nervous system. So like periods of long, walks, especially out in nature, or lower intensity intervals. So like I do high intensity intervals of sprinting only twice a week.
Okay.
The rest of the days,
I've been going
the rest of the days, I do intervals, but they're more in like that. My heart rate's not as high. So they don't get me out into those crazy ranges. So even though I'm not like doing the classic Maffetone training, I sort of learned that like a while ago that you can't drain the well every day.
Right.
But you need to keep the training process going. So you have to have high intensity days to stimulate the adaptations that are going to really make your muscles grow, your bones, your connective tissues. They're going to create more, capillaries, the mitochondria, these like powerhouses of the cell. But then you have to have those days where it's more about lower to moderate intensity.
Yeah.
And that helps you recover. So I like it. But I don't think everybody necessarily needs to go out and like run or something for 50 minutes or something, like he might say in one of his books. You could do it in a lot of different ways with little circuits. I like my Airdyne bike. I use the rower sometimes, or light kettlebells, swing snatches, brisk walks. It doesn't, it doesn't have to be one particular, again, you don't have to marry the exercise, or it doesn't have, or like, oh, it can only be done with running. Well, when I run, like it's T, my knee hurts. She says her knees hurt, but don't run.
Right.
Like just walk or build up your hiking or use a bike or just do kettlebell swings or snatches with a light weight. Like there's so many ways to get those training effects,
and that's what
without
keeps
beating yourself up.
And that's what keeps it fun.
Yeah, but try to find ones that you enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you don't enjoy it, you're not going to stick with it.
Yeah.
Kind of like with food, right? If you get on an eating plan, or you get on a lower carb diet, like you're espousing for somebody who's really got some metabolic issues, but they don't like their food, they're probably not going to stick with it. But if they can find meals of things that they really enjoy, their chances of sticking with it are so much better.
Yeah, the low carb diet is actually really rich and diverse, but it takes a while. People are so, they have such ingrained habits around the way that they cook the standard American food, what they're normally used to seeing on a plate.
Yes.
Or what their go-to takeout food is, or whatever, like whatever things are like that. And when they start the low carb, at first it seems like, well, God, there's nothing to eat here, but actually there is a lot. You're just not used to, you're not used to cooking or thinking this way, right? And so, it's the same as with the exercise. Diversity is key, and it takes, in the beginning of a low carb lifestyle, it does take a while to gain that diversity, because you have to learn basically a whole new way of thinking about food. So, but anyway, I don't want to.
Right.
But what is your view about nutrition overall? Like, how do you eat? Because you're thin as a rail, you're ripped, and it's not just the exercise. Right?
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't say I eat perfect, and I'm certainly, I'm maybe a little more fortunate in that I can eat more carbohydrates than some people without, gaining a bunch of weight and drastically affecting my health. I think I do have a genetic issue with like cholesterol and stuff that's popped up in the last 10 years or so, which I'm dealing with. And I'm, I'm marginally still okay, and they don't want to medicate me or anything. But yeah, I mean, I'm kind of like a moderation guy. Like I like everything, but I definitely feel better with more protein. I love fat, and I need a certain amount of carbohydrates. I can't do a vegan diet. I've tried that. I felt terrible on that. That was really, really rough for me. I tried it for several months in my 20s. And it didn't work for me. But I tried it. I've tried I'll have low carb periods while I've tried. I'm pretty responsive to it in terms of losing, weight and fat pretty quickly. For me, it's mostly calories. I mean, if I just eat less, I just lose very easily. I mean, I just have a very responsive metabolism. But I mean, if I were to, like, when I've looked at my calories and my macronutrients, like my protein, carbs, and fat, I'm kind of have like a sort of a zone, like isocaloric diet, kind of like a third of each.
Right.
It's sort of like where I kind of gravitate towards. When I'm on my training days, and with some of my ice cream consumption, it sends me a little bit more towards, probably higher on the fat and the carbs on some days. But yeah, I got to have the proteins. I think it's so individual, like how you got to tweak it. But that's kind of what works for me. I mean, I think I've been lucky in that I've never become sedentary. I've never had a desk job. I've always been, either a personal trainer doing massage. Now I've added in physical therapy, or I don't know what you call what I do. It's just like a hybrid of all of it.
Yeah.
So I'm just pretty on my feet and pretty active a lot. And then I like to do activities that stimulate the muscles and metabolism. So it's just easier to keep leaner when you just never stop doing it.
Right.
So I think that's really, I don't think there's anything magical about my eating other than, and if I do eat, when I eat carbohydrates, I try to eat whole foods. I try to eat sprouted grain bread, and, I eat lots of berries, nuts and seeds, which is not really much of carbs. I do, steel cut oats, or I've messed around with quinoa and spelt and different millet, things that are a little bit more nutritious than like your refined white flour kind of stuff. Right.
Yeah. You sound like Linda is waving to me over here out of the
Hi,
view.
Linda.
She's saying, yeah, that sounds like my diet.
Yeah. Yeah. But I try to look at the data. Like there's certain numbers that they say people should get enough protein, so many grams per kilogram. And if you're active and doing strength training, you probably need a little bit more. And if you're older, you need a little bit more. Right. Because our ability to assimilate the protein goes down.
Right.
I'm not a big supplement guy. I've taken so many supplements when I was younger. The only thing I mess around with is I take fish oils, like really high grade, because I don't eat a lot of fish. Nobody in my house likes fish.
Right.
So I only eat fish if I eat out or something. So, because it stinks up the house. So I like fish, but we just don't eat it much. So I take fish oils. Every now and then I'll go through a period of taking a multivitamin. Rarely. I just try to eat a lot of varied colored fruits and vegetables every day. And then I take creatine is the only ergogenic supplement I take. And I take Creapure, which is like German creatine. It's the purest, doesn't have any crap in it. And I only take half a teaspoon a day when I'm taking it. Like I just started taking it again after months. And I'll just take it every day until I run out of the bottle. And then I'll take like a month off and I'll start it up again. And after about 30 days, my creatine levels are up sort of to their highest. And creatine, for those who don't know, it's just like it's the energy currency for your body for something under like 10 seconds. So some sort of hard effort for like 6 to 8 seconds, your body's actually not burning carbohydrates or fats. It's using this creatine to create the ATP, right? I don't need to tell you, you're a biochemist, but for the other people, and then I'll do a little caffeine as an ergogenic aid, because there's a ton of research that caffeine is helpful. It gives you a little boost, especially if you're not a habitual caffeine user, which I am not. I don't do a lot of, I don't need caffeine. Like I'm a pretty high energy person as it is. So yeah, I mean, I'm kind of like a little bit of everything with my diet, and whole foods as much as possible. You know, try to make it, but it's got to be enjoyable. You gotta like it. You gotta want to eat
Oh,
it.
I
But
agree.
doesn't mean you eat Twinkies all day.
I think food is a personal thing. I mean, yeah, and you have to enjoy what you're eating. Yeah,
Yeah,
whatever your meal plan is, it should not be like you're in prison or something. Um,
exactly.
we only have a few minutes left. I wanted to get some feedback on what you think someone my age should be doing every day, and then also on the days that you're working out to help the mobility issue. You know, I don't want to call it stretching because I know that
Right.
stretching is not stretching. You understand what I mean by that? Um, like,
The whole idea of flexibility and mobility and what's the difference, or it's just turned into this giant cluster. It's
yeah,
like it's just basically, let's call it like suppleness, like your ability to move,
right.
like, and that's going to involve do the joints move, right? So
Yeah.
like you got the two bones that meet. What's the deal with the ligaments? Some people are a little bit more like Linda. You're what? Like she's more flexible.
Oh,
She's
yeah.
better at yoga than you and I are. Like, right? Like her ligaments are just more mobile. Like, so
Well,
there's like a
everyone's
test you
better at
can
yoga
do.
than me.
Yeah. If you can bring like your thumb to this part of your forearm, can you get your pinky back? It's called the Baton's index. If somebody wants to look it up, the Baton score, it's like a 9-point score. You know, can you hyperextend your elbows? Can you stand with your knees straight and put your palms on the floor without bending your knees? Like some people are just naturally pretty bendy, and they probably do well in yoga. So those people probably need to do some strength training because they have so much flexibility that it almost puts them at a risk for like hypermobility, right?
Right.
So as long as they're strong over the range, they're cool. People like us that are like a 0 out of 9 on that scale, and we're, you know, if you take us into those positions, you're literally like snapping our joints like a twig. Like we need to be more concerned. It doesn't mean we need to go do yoga all day. I mean, I don't really like yoga personally, but I like some of the movements and I modify them to make them safe for my body or my clients' bodies. So you have to have enough range. So I find as people get older, rather than sitting there and sort of, you know, holding for 30 seconds, and you can certainly do that, is I like to do more like active movements where people
Yeah.
they're actively engaging the muscles over range repeatedly. Maybe it's
Right.
5 to 10 repetitions. And that's not only using your muscles. So certain muscles are turning on, other muscles are lengthening. So the nervous system's involved, but it's also getting the joint surfaces and stimulating those, like the capsule and the synovium where we get our WD-40, basically, our synovial fluid, or what's left of it, right? We do lose that.
Yeah.
So these active movements, focusing on the rhythm, and you can hold it for a few seconds when you go out. You know, I feel is probably better to do like more often. And then maybe at the end of the day, when you're not going to do any more movements, that's when somebody can do like, you know, the static stretching for 30 to 60 seconds, because that stuff kind of makes you sleepy. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it makes you kind of relax. So I'll static stretch sometimes before I go to bed because it just kind of helps me wind down. But
Yeah.
it does make me more flexible. Like
Yeah. I
flexible.
didn't ask in
Yeah.
regard to being more
Yeah.
flexible. I was trying to think.
Right.
You know, all the work that I've been doing lately, I'm sitting in this chair a lot during the day, and anyone who's, you know, I'm sure you experience this too. When you first get up out of the chair, it's just
Oh,
like your body seems to be locked in that position, and it's
yeah.
like, all right, I'm going to go work out now. What should I do? And then again, I learned so much from you in the early 2000s, because I was sitting there with you going, okay, I got to pay attention to this because someday I'm going to use it.
You're going to use it. Yeah. Teach it.
There was a lot of stuff that I just learned. How do you say that? It was like it just went into my head.
Yeah.
I've learned that what works best for me. It's like when you were talking about nutrition, you know, what you sort of gravitate towards is mobility work where I'm actually moving, not like
Yeah.
I'm going to do this stretch. That doesn't really work for me. But if I pick up a
Yeah.
PVC pipe and I start doing things with it,
Yeah. Moving
yeah,
it up. Yep. Yeah. Same here. I mean, I do
yeah,
some stretching, like I said, but meaning like trying to think of the muscle. I'll have some clients do some light stretching after their workout if they've done, just to sort of try to restore their normal length. Not that that's
right,
going to make them Gumby, but the warm up is the key. You gotta gradually, you gotta heat up the body, and then you got to take those joints right through a progressively, larger range that's safe for you.
right.
And
Safe
safe that's the key
word.
word.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that's where having some sort of like a personal assessment and inventory to see what's safe for you now. And over
right.
time, can we expand on that and teach your nervous system to allow you? A lot of people are tight, not just because their connective tissues are like this, it's because they haven't used it, and their nervous system feels threatened when they go into ranges they don't know.
Yeah, because they're being pushed to go into ranges that they haven't
They
done.
don't feel safe
Yeah,
because their nervous system doesn't have control over those ranges because they don't ever go there. Like if people don't squat lower than the chair or the toilet, they don't know what to do when they get below that, right?
yeah,
Because in this country, we don't spend a lot of time in a squat, unlike other countries,
yeah. I know.
right? Like in Asia or India or something, people can
Sure.
just squat all day long. Yeah. So we maybe we'll do another thing just on mobility or something on
That would be
another day.
cool. Yeah, I would
Yeah.
love that.
With some examples, maybe just some examples of some sequencing of sort of mobility for like the masters athlete or something that's more realistic, right?
Yeah, I think that would be good for me too.
Or even the young. I mean, when I was 25, I was like you. My brother and I, we were always been the stiffest guys on any team. We did martial arts, and we were young. We were the laughing stock of, but we're that shortness kind of makes you athletic in other ways. You can be a little faster. You show me somebody who's Gumby loose. They're probably not the fastest person on the team.
Right.
So there's
No.
pros and cons to sort of your genetic connective tissue type.
Yeah, and I was definitely faster at running, but I definitely am like, now I notice how important it is for me to make sure that I'm stretching, because I do have a sedentary job. Like I do sit behind a desk and everything. And so I notice, like, for me sometimes, and I just want to point this out really fast just because I thought it was really interesting, is when I was first training for my position, the individual who was training me, she was like, I was like, oh, well, I did yoga this morning. And she's like, I don't know how you have time to like work out. And I was like, what do you mean? And I just started this position, right? Because I was like, and I started to freak out because I was like, oh my gosh, am I like not going to have any time
Right.
to like work out in the morning, or like, I don't know, eat, or like, I don't want to dedicate my whole 20s to my whole entire, job for the rest of, you know what I mean? Like I started to freak out a little bit because I was like, where are you prioritizing? And I realized that it's really important to, if you do have a sedentary job, this is for anybody out there, it's really important to prioritize yourself. I like get up in the morning, I journal, I meditate, I try and do yoga or go for a walk. I'm here in South Dakota, so yesterday I went for a 40-minute horse ride. Like I'm trying to get out to do, like you said, it doesn't have to be the same thing every day, but just to be mobile. And I think people forget about that so frequently when you are in, an office job or sitting behind a desk, is that you need to be putting yourself first, your nutrition, your mobility, and just
And
overall
play.
and
I
play.
think one
Yeah.
thing that I haven't talked about this is, like, a lot of my workouts have elements of play. I do a lot of medicine ball with people, throwing, catching,
Yeah.
agility ladder. Like you have to have, like, once we get out of like PE, which is almost non-existent in high school anymore for kids, like people stop playing.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have to have an element of like a game, but it doesn't mean you have to play and be competitive. We know once something gets really competitive, an element of health goes down.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But competing is healthy. But playing, like you look at animals, like there has to be an element of play.
100%. I agree with that.
If you enjoyed this episode, look for us, Spill the Tea, every week on Fridays, and sometimes, like this week, an additional episode that will appear earlier in the week. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and click the bell next to it. See you next week.